My first coaching job, I was so bad as a coach, and I didn't know what I was doing. But very early, I was prepped. I could run a drill. I had my practice plans. I did all this, and within the first year, I dealt with a player whose two best friends committed suicide. I dealt with a player whose ex-boyfriend was stalking her, and we had to involve not just local and state, but federal law enforcement. And then I had a player that got pregnant and spent a good period of time trying to self-abort. And I all of a sudden realized that, hey, this is not about volleyball or passing and figuring out ways to be efficient on siding out of rotation one. It is helping people through life.
This is the Leave It Better podcast, powered by the Side Out Foundation. Here's your host, Hall of Fame coach, Janice Kruger.
Hi, everyone. Today it's my pleasure to have a guest on the Leave It Better podcast, Dr. Jaime Gordon, the CEO of the American Volleyball Coaches Association, otherwise known as AVCA. I believe you started your role here in 2023, somewhere in the middle of the year. What you bring to this position is amazing experiences and impressive records of your path through the sport of volleyball and really administration as well. You coached and worked at the Morehead State University for 20-some years there, super successful with the volleyball program, actually was one of the winningest head coach there in all sports. Ended up doing a dual role for a time being as athletic director and volleyball coach. Oh my God, you were busy. And, super successful, won a lot of championships, made it to the NCAA post season appearances. And prior, and we were just chatting about this before we started recording, that you were at one point a volunteer coach at the University of Kentucky, an assistant coach and recruiting coordinator there. And I think there were several different coaches there during those stints that you had. And your first head coaching positions, I believe, high school was at Henry Clay High School, and then also at West Virginia. Where'd you go? West Virginia Wesleyan. Mm-hmm. Everywhere you've been, Jaime, you have been so successful. What is the secret about all this?
I think probably the secret that all good coaches or successful coaches, based on how you want to define success, is surround yourself with some really good people and then get out of their way.
Right.
Remove all the obstacles. And I can tell you that early on in my coaching career, I had a lot of tremendous athletes that made me look tremendously competent because I was a horrible coach. And if I look back and I think of oh my gosh, what was I thinking back then? It's amazing that I survived the profession, let alone had the opportunity to have a long career in it. But I also had the distinct advantage of being around some tremendous coaches as people who I could model around. The first of those being Kathy DeBoer. She was a person that I started as a volunteer and even a student practice player for her when she was at Kentucky. Was around Fran Flory, who is a Hall of Fame coach, Jonna Braden, who had tremendous success at a lot of different levels there. And then being around some really good administrators. You mentioned West Virginia Wesleyan. I had an athletics director there, George Klebitz, that gave me an opportunity to coach a successful program that was probably built by Tia Brandell, who's now at Ferris State and has done a tremendous job there.
Yeah.
And I was able to step into a program that was set up for success so that I couldn't screw it up too bad. So, yes, I've been very fortunate and have been lucky enough to have some amazing women and athletes that agreed to have a shared vision. And
sure,
again, all those wins, I never scored a point. So
right. Isn't that just, you mentioned some really fantastic individuals. And I love, it sort of seems like you're sort of sitting in the gratitude, the gratitude of all the things that have brought you to this point. You were originally from New Jersey, okay? A New Jersey guy who ends up in high school, I believe, playing some volleyball. What and how? Why'd you start being a volleyball player?
Yeah. I didn't start off, and that's the funny thing. I did not start off as a volleyball player. I started off as a basketball player. I grew up in a basketball house. My father actually played basketball for the Cuban national team. So ever since I can remember, I was going to New York Knicks games. I was playing basketball always, in the parks and stuff like that. And then in high school, they had just started a boys program at Teaneck High School and in the spring. And I was thinking, you know what? This would be good. This is better than like baseball or something like that to help the basketball game. And I fell in love with it. And it wasn't a very popular day in the household when I was like, yeah, Dad, I'm going volleyball. It's a great sport, a great culture. I've had the pleasure to meet so many people through it. And actually, I went to college to be an architect.
I saw that too.
Yeah, I want to design sporting facilities and arenas. Oh. And it was really my time around Kathy DeBoer that made me start thinking, well, maybe this is something that I'd like to pursue. And it was funny. I sat down with her, asked her for some advice, coaching advice, and she told me, don't do it. Don't get into it. Stay away, go be an architect. And I didn't listen to her, fortunately. Have not practiced a single day as an architect, but have been very grateful for a long career in athletics.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that might, that background is probably pretty helpful for you, even in where you are right now with the popularity of things. Things are changing. Things are getting better. Facilities are getting better. Where that may come into play for you to have that kind of background.
Yeah, and it's interesting the approach that the College of Architecture at the University of Kentucky had was very design oriented. So there was a lot of philosophical pieces of it, and one of the things that I learned that has been tremendously impactful for being a coach or being an administrator was understanding perspective and to get out of just the way that we see things from our own eyes. And so whether it would be sitting down with an athlete, I always went into those meetings from their perspective. How are they stepping into this meeting? If it was me talking to my AD at the time, what is he dealing with that I'm walking into? Because we're most connected to our own perspective. Yes. And so the more that we can engage and appreciate the others, I think you have the opportunity to be a little bit more impactful.
Yeah. Oh, those are wonderful words of wisdom there. That's for sure. So let's go back. We're going to go back into this beginning volleyball phase a little bit further. So you got to Kentucky, and I think you also got a history or an art history degree there. And I'm like, okay, how are we fitting all this together? But you played for the nationally ranked Kentucky club program, men's club program there. I got to know, what position did you play?
Through my time there, I played several, probably most in the middle. I did take a season and set. A little bit of right side, but I was fortunate enough to have some opportunities to do some different things, but primarily in middle, undersized, for sure.
Undersized middle. Yeah. I also read that you were a captain of that club program. And I've run into a lot of folks through my time with the Side Out Foundation that are big time leaders and maybe volleyball coaches that are doing some great things. And they were part of a club program. And those that were in that role, and I don't know if you guys are just, it's something you're kind of organizing and have a lot of control over being a club situation, but you guys are dynamite.
Well, thanks. But I think in the club setup, the people who took leadership positions, because you didn't have an administration or anything, so you were doing the scheduling, you were helping out with that. So the people who took leadership roles in club programs have a true passion and love for it, and are willing to put in the extra time so that you have these opportunities to play and compete. And there are a ton, as you've mentioned, of people that came through the ranks in the club world. And honestly, too many to mention, but it's funny to see how many of them have stayed and had tremendous careers in coaching, in volleyball, in administration. Yeah, it would be a fun family tree to create there.
Yeah.
Sure.
You're right. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about your education process, and I always said, gosh, the best thing is just stay in school. And I think you did a little bit of this. Okay.
Yeah.
So 2 bachelor's degree from Kentucky, a master's degree from Kentucky in science and sports management, and then your doctorate in educational leadership from Morehead State. Wow. How do you use all that?
It was trying to push off the real world. College is fun, and especially when you're playing club volleyball and you don't have eligibility limitations back then. So there was not a whole lot of motivation to get out into it. But it was funny, the doctorate piece I did. I completed it, I guess, 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And it was, there was a couple of factors that went into it. One was a very good friend of mine who was a professor that kept on telling me that, hey, you need to do this. You're fit for it. The other side is I've always been a continuing learner. I love to understand all the things that I don't know and try to figure those things out. And then probably the competitive side of me, I had been in a couple of meetings in higher education, and there were a couple of professors with their doctorates that treated you a little bit different without those. And I remember one particular corrected somebody in a meeting. They said, we'll call him Johnson, Mr. Johnson. And he stopped and said, no, it's Dr. Johnson. And my competitiveness was kind of like, you know what? F you. I'll get one of those. Like, you're not that special. And so I called up my friend. I was like, hey, you've been trying to convince me for the last couple of years to do this. Okay, what do we need to do? I'm in. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how that competitive spirit in some of us is just really, hang on.
But it probably opened up some doors that I hadn't thought about or considered. And I'm grateful for going through it, other than just the, competitive kind of screw you.
That's very fun. I think Cecile Renaud used to say it's just sort of a process of just, you got to work your way through it. Don't quit. Just keep on going, keep on swimming. So, yeah. So with all of this, background beginning parts, and I'm sure there's things I left out of there, but to get to where you are today as the leader of the AVCA, and you're coming after some pretty amazing folks that have just laid the groundwork, and they're all just such legends in their own right. And I'm sure you feel a little bit of pressure with some of that, but
absolutely,
what a wonderful time to be in this position for you.
Yeah. I'm going to pause and just go back a little bit to what you mentioned as far as the leadership that the AVCA has had. And I'll go specifically with Kathy DeBoer. There have been tremendous leaders, but probably nobody that has had as much impact on the sport or the association as she has. When she took over, what was about 18 years ago, and she had a 17-year career at that position, the AVCA was not in great shape. It was in tough place financially. she shored those things up and really started an incredible growth pattern, and really was the godmother of beach volleyball at the collegiate side of things.
Right.
Would fight when it's needed, advocate, and collaborate as well. And so it was interesting because the first time she had mentioned it to me about, hey, would you ever think about this job? She goes, because I'm not doing this forever. I said to her, heck no, there's no way. Like, I do not want to be the person that follows the John Wooden of this industry. Like it's going to be impossible for me to match what you've done. And that's how I'll be graded is by what you've done. And that's just not fair. So, and she did share with me, she said, I don't have a record. She's like, John Wooden and all these people have records. And so it's easy to compare. She goes, in this job, it's a lot harder too. And so anybody who knows Kathy also knows that she is maybe the most difficult person to say no to. And she just kept working me. But honestly, as I thought about it, it was an unbelievable opportunity to make a move from being a coach and then 5 years as an athletics director into this position at such an incredible time of where the AVCA is in good position. It's healthy. It's robust. Our membership is good. But then you see what's happening with volleyball on the national and honestly, even international landscape. It's exceptional. I mean, there's so much momentum. There's so much growth and opportunity there. And I think probably some of my experience, whether it be at Moorhead of having to be creative and trying to build a program there, or then becoming an athletics director and trying to be creative with, hey, we've got limited resources and things like that. How do we do that? I think I've been able to apply some of that creativity, which probably roots back to the architecture thing as well, is how do we be creative in creating a vision of what the sport can be in 5, 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Kathy DeBoer she's something that I call her all the time. I say, okay, what kind of questions should I ask this person? What can you tell me about this person? And it's always been really fun because she's very candid.
Yes.
So were you part of her program as a volunteer when she did she told that story about getting second place in a tournament and driving her kids home over the bridge and stopping because they were dancing around and happy in the van and rolled down the window and threw the trophy over the side. Were you in that van?
I was not in that van. I was around the program at that time, but I was more of the practice player. So I did not, or was doing some volunteer stuff. So I was not around there, but I will share a part to the story that does not normally get. So it's true. But here's the other part is coming back that week. Butch Cope, who was their sports information director, set up a little bit of a sting on Kathy. So he worked out, and there was the secretary at the time comes in and says, "Hey, there is a officer from the Kentucky State Police investigating an accident on the Ohio River. And there was somebody boating who got hit with a trophy, and they've traced the trophy back to Kentucky Volleyball and is just curious to find out, was it left at a rest area or something like that?" And so Kathy was like, oh my God. And then Butch came in and kind of shared let the joke come up. But there was a little bit more to that. But the story is true. And Kathy was incredibly competitive and still is competitive and does not like to celebrate second place.
Yeah, right. We love Kathy DeBoer. Growth and engagement changes, initiatives, and things that you're trying to do. And, this, I remember back in like 1983, or maybe it was even 82. I can't remember exactly when it started with the AVCA. But I have loved this organization from that beginning, and we've grown it a lot. And I think under your tutelage here, we've also seen some growth and some changes. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those? We have a lot of high school folks that do support the Side Out Foundation, and we're always trying to share, wonderful things in our sport with them.
My philosophy or my belief of where the AVCA is in the landscape of our sport is I view us as water. And so it's our responsibility. If there is a void in the volleyball community, then it's our job and responsibility to fill that void. If there is a service or something that's already being done well, then we just roll right over it. And so I think part of initially was looking at, where do we serve the voids, and how do we continue to promote and grow the game? One of the areas that we've really tried to get behind is actually bringing all the leaders in our sport together to have meaningful conversations of how do we work together.
Awesome.
Because we've got all of these amazing things that are happening from our national team with USA Volleyball, with youth, with the growth of USAV, JVA, AAU. We have four professional leagues when we look at the AVP, Athletes Unlimited. PVF just finished their first year, and League One is going into their inaugural year. We have TV networks that are making significant investment in our sport. The Big Ten Network is significantly committed to volleyball. ESPN and ABC have committed to our sport. So getting those people in sports marketing, companies both inside and outside, and let's get together and start figuring out what does our sport need? How do we work together? Because as you mentioned, our sport's in this amazing time. And if we don't work together, then shame on us as the leaders to not take full advantage. So that's one of the things that we've done, and we're starting to see some positive things come out of it. You may remember the old AVCA Showcase or the State Farm Classic or the NACWA, and that had kind of been on a shelf in hibernation for the last 11 years. And I really looked at that as a tremendous opportunity for us. And we worked hard with the NCAA and some other groups and launched the first version again this past August with a really neat event in Louisville. We plan to continue that and expand that in upcoming years. We've been able to lean in on the beach side of our pairs national championship. That'll be hosted for the third year in the middle of November in Huntsville. We've built a great partnership with Volleyball World, which is the media rights arm of the FIVB. And so that's been a big positive for us, but specifically in the high school space. And I think it's very important in real growth that we approach things in two different ways. One is from the top down. So let's make sure that the very best of our sport is representing us and growing in the best way, because that's where a lot of modeling will come from. And then it's from the bottom up. And what are the grassroots efforts that we can get behind? And I think high school is one of those areas. I mean, it is the number one participation sport for girls, and not by a little, by 22%. There are 22% more girls playing high school volleyball than girls basketball. That's an amazing number. And when I tell people outside of our sport that, they're blown away by it. But how do we elevate the high school game? What can we do to improve that? Then there's things that we can do quickly. And then I think things that take a little bit longer. So one of our short-term initiatives is this year we will be having a National Player of the Year. And not simply just by their high school season, but overall, who is the top pre-collegiate volleyball player in the country? And we'll identify 4 finalists and really celebrate those people and figure out how do we continue to elevate that awards program for high school aged athletes. Now, longer term, we're actually working very closely with a company, Volley Station, to try and figure out how do we build a complete ecosystem of things like stats, game scoring, but then live scoring, so that hey, we can have people following the results and people have a single place to go to say, hey, this is where, this is how this high school team's doing. And these are the teams in my district. And I'm getting notifications because we also want to build that whole overall community. And then the last part of the high school side, and I think this is something that the sport of volleyball needs to be very aware of and conscious about, is that we need to maintain the accessibility of our sport. And make sure that we have programs that are expanding and having volleyball reach out to people that may not normally have, or at least as it's growing, may not have the access to it, that we're going to places, maybe it's urban areas, maybe it's rural areas, but spots that again, we want this sport to be available to anybody and everyone. And we're seeing some of that growth on the boys' side as well. There's tremendous growth there. So, I know you asked me a question. That's probably a really long answer.
Well,
I apologize.
Wow. Yeah, no, great. I was thinking as you finished that last part up, getting it into areas where there isn't much, you always find a basketball hoop somewhere, whether it's on a pole or something, but just for them to even understand how to set something up with a ribbon and a ball and whatever and volley and to get some of the love for the game going on there. We probably could do more there in terms of helping folks out to make it simpler. Your idea with the volley station stuff, I'm really curious about that. As I've been watching some of the collegiate games, which gosh, I love that they're all on TV and I can just turn the channel and I'm going on ESPN Plus and I'm just seeing whatever I want to see. And I think we need something where I'm always having to go to my internet and go, okay, I got to look up Morehead State. I want to go to the roster. I want to see who are these kids? Where's that coach from? A little bit of stuff on them. It's difficult to find sometimes. And as we know, when people get to know people better, they tend to have more of a reason, to follow. So any work going in that direction?
Yeah, no. And that's exactly. So, probably not a lot of people know. So Volley Station is it's a company. It's a statistics company. It's a tech company. They're really expanding a lot. They're the ones that are doing all of the scoring and statistics for the Olympics, for VNL. So they are really at the highest level of our sport. And they are a volleyball only company. So it's not like they do soccer and basketball and everything also. And their owners and their leadership are tremendously committed to the sport. They're former volleyball players. So they are from our group and they want to do some things. And as we've sat down and started to talk about, hey, that water, here's where there's a void. How do we work together that they can provide or create something that can serve? And so here's our vision of how this would work, especially in the high school space. So if, let's say you're a high school coach and you're keeping your stats with a very simple stat program that's on an iPad, and you're keeping score with a very simple score sheet program, and those two things automatically talk to each other. And then because they're talking to each other, we also have an AVCA scoring app. And so now let's say you just won 2 sets, but maybe there's somebody on your team that just scored 12 points or has 10 kills. Well, that notification would say, hey, Assumption High School is just won and Janice had 15 kills. So it's all using the technology to help provide that amplification of, hey, something's really neat happening here, or there's something special. And then as that grows, we can help highlight, who are our 20 kill scorers from the week across the country and have some of those lists and really, celebrate those things. And if we want our sport to grow at the highest levels, the earlier we can build the narratives and tell those stories, it leads into college, which then leads into pros. And I think we become a sport that can can compete with the mainstream professional leagues.
Yeah. Oh man. Like I'm just kind of like, wow. So excited about this. Probably my entire life I dealt with like scratching and crawling and trying to, get everything I could to help the sport. And to hear some of these things that are going on right now and to really witness the level of play that we're being able to see and the athleticism of these women and young girls, it's, skill level too has just the coaching and the training. It just makes my heart sing. Having been in this for so long.
It is tremendous. And obviously I'm biased, as are you.
A little.
But I really do not believe that there is another sport that showcases female athleticism as comprehensively and dynamically as volleyball does. And I think as a sport that is more popular on the women's side, to have it get to where it is without a male counterpart that's driving it in the way that basketball does, or even baseball does for softball, that this is truly an organic process, I think is amazing. But the other part of it is we also need to make sure that we're thinking about how we are presenting that, because while as volleyball fans, we love it, we're trying to bring more and more people into the tent. And so,
convert.
Yeah, absolutely. And make them aware, the awareness side of it. But, I think one of the areas that we probably need to be looking at, again, as we talk about how does it on the top and the bottom. So if we try to improve things at the top, and let's say right now, collegiate women's and how it's being broadcast, we really need to be conscious about pace of play. I think from the moment that the ball is served to the whistle that ends the rally, our game is awesome. Like we do not need to mess with that. But the time that goes from the ball down to that next serve, we really need to be mindful of things. Challenge review is a really good thing, but we need to be better, and that needs to evolve. The pace of which even officials scan the court, like we all need to kind of come together and figure out how do we make sure that these things are a little bit more compact, a little bit tighter. We probably don't need timeouts that are a minute and a half. We could probably restructure some of that. As a coach, I could never come up with 30 or 90 seconds to keep on talking, 4 times a set. And then if it's a 5-setter, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's 20 timeouts I just had to deal with, not to mention the 3-minute break. So the players definitely don't want to hear us coaches talking that long anyway.
Yeah,
so, but TV also, those breaks and things like that. So I also think that we've got to be looking at how does our game evolve in the presentation side, especially as it applies to television.
Do you think we'll be able to get the cost of like not having to have linesmen or just enough cameras and angles that can really show the game, the speed? Is that in the works too? Are TV folks or really universities for that matter, conferences, willing to do some of those things to maybe help in those areas you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. The SEC incorporated Hawkeye, so they put a real significant investment into their replay system. It involved a bunch of sports, but they've stepped it up. Anybody that watched the first serve, they would have noticed that our event in Louisville would have noticed that there were no lines judges. Now we did invest in that technology, and we had immediate electronic line calling. And it was fantastic, and but it's expensive and probably not feasible for a school to have for all their matches. But I know that the NCAA is looking at that and saying, how do they involve some of that technology to showcase the pinnacle of the season? And just like any technology, as it evolves and more people use it, the prices come down and it becomes more accessible. I just read an article today that Wimbledon is eliminating their lines judges.
I heard that.
Yes, they're stepping up. things technology wise. But no, you're 100% right. We've got to look at some of that. And I can say that TV is really investing in their production. For our event, ESPN came in, they had five talent, 5 different commentators there. They did a studio show. They brought in cranes. They did a full championship level production. And so they're wanting to improve the game. And so figuring out how we, again, engage them in some of that dialogue is important too.
Yes. And that was fun to have that. And just a couple comments about that first serve showcase. It was so fun because it was being promoted through the summer, and you're just like, oh my God, it's almost time. They're going to be there. And the teams that you had selected, or really any, would be awesome, but that were stepping in there to play. And on that weekend, it was just really a kind of an exciting buildup to get to that, to get our season started. So
yeah, well,
kudos to you.
Well, thank you. It's funny. I there was a lot that went into that. I absolutely give full credit to the 4 coaches that participated, because they signed on not knowing what this thing was going to be. And there were a lot of unanswered questions for, practice and preparation and how much time they would have. And when it was all said and done, what we wound up doing was building pretty much like a transatlantic airliner and have it launch from a helicopter pad, because we were so quick on doing things. So we're excited about what next year can be and how we can, really start to promote that as soon as the season is done, and say, hey, here's where you're going to get your next taste at it.
Yeah. Well, those guys have a lot of faith, and the 4 coaches that you had in their programs they're just pretty much willing to, let's build this thing. They're all in on that end for sure.
Absolutely.
First serve, we're talking about that, was in Louisville. And now we're going to have the championship and the convention there in Louisville as well. Is that local community pretty excited about all this? I know we got volleyball people around the country are, but I can only imagine that some of that's caught on fire locally or within the state about this amazing event that's going to be there.
Yeah. The community of not just Louisville, but the entire state of Kentucky has really become a tremendous volleyball community. And you look at the job that Danny Busboom Kelly has done there as a coach, what Craig Skinner has done at UK. Anytime those two are talked about, you have to also think about Travis Hudson and the amazing job that he's done at Western Kentucky. And so you have this incredible culture that has just continued to build and build and build. I can tell you from being kind of boots on the ground here, there are a lot of disappointed fans that are not able to get tickets because of how quickly everything sold. And so even though the Yum Center seats almost 21,000, it in no way, shape, or form can accommodate the excitement of volleyball in the Louisville and state of Kentucky.
Yeah. Wow. It's been a while since I've been to the convention, been out of coaching here for just a little bit. And it was always my favorite thing to go and to hear people and to, catch maybe some ideas or to meet up with folks. What are you most excited about, or what are some things that you could share with us about the upcoming convention part?
We've got some incredible presenters. We have a pre-con focused on lessons learned from Paris. So Karch is coming in to share, hey, going through the quad, what are some of the trends internationally? We'll have the same thing on the men's side. We're kind of working through that a little bit now that John Spara has transitioned to the CEO position. But we have Nikolai Gerbuk, who's the coach of the Polish men's team that'll be there. He'll be presenting. They were silver. Number 1 ranked team in the world. So the thing that I think is important to know about convention is, one, it's definitely not local. It's an international event. We've got people coming from all over the world in there. But I would also, and this is, I think, one of the things as we look to figure out how we grow, is it doesn't have to be just for coaches. It's not just a coaches convention. It's a volleyball convention. And I think anybody who's a true fan that, there is so much to offer there, whether it be things in the marketplace, areas of education, different demonstrations. We run our Phenom program, which will bring in 600 of some of the top high school players to do stuff. We're partnering with USA Volleyball with some other things. And honestly, Janice, for anybody that wants tickets now, really, if they your pathway is sign up for convention, because we've probably got the biggest block of available tickets, and we do not sell them individually. So you've got to be coming into the convention. So,
I love this. I love that. Yeah, I always remember that part. That's got a convention registration. You were going to get a ticket if you wanted it. So, wow. Yeah. So fans out there that you like you said here, there's lots to be learned and lots of things to see in, athletics, but specifically for volleyball too, that you can be a part of.
I think I always, even as a coach myself, or even as a fan, I loved listening. Like as a basketball fan, like I love listening to like Mike Krzyzewski talk, and he can talk X's and O's for days. As a fan, I eat that up. Or, hey, how do you communicate to your coach? So it's almost can be one of those things where if you want sort of behind the curtain type, it might be a really neat experience. We've got weekend packages. We've got a bunch of different opportunities. But I think too is even for us in the AVCA and convention is how do we embrace more and more people that really want to embrace our sport?
Yeah. I know eyes are being opened all over as they're watching the game on TV and really kind of falling in love with what they're seeing and this fast-paced game. And so we might get a few folks based off of this comment here. So what's the most favorite part of your job?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I've been asked that in that way. I've had a lot of people say, hey, are you enjoying it? How's it going? Things like that. And I usually comment that it's so much better because as an athletics director, about 80% of your time is crisis management. And so I don't have to deal with that. It's all growth and stuff. But I would say it's really the people that I get to work with and advocate for. I also have loved, I would say in very early in the job, I learned how much I don't know about volleyball. And I mean that in a very respectful way of, you become so familiar with your own space as a Division I coach. And I go, gosh, I really didn't understand what high school coaches were really going through, or what are the beach coaches and how that dynamic, even at the NAIA space or on the professional side of things or internationally. And so through this, I have learned so much and appreciate so much more about our sport at more dimensions than I probably appreciated at the time. And I mean this again in a very good way. I have a feeling that John Speraw is getting ready to go through that as well. And he and I are going to have breakfast tomorrow together and talk about it. And because anytime you go into that type of position to where now you're responsible for so much more, you really learn to appreciate an awful lot. So I've really enjoyed that. And that's probably the thing that I've had the most fun with.
That's great. So of your career also, here's another one for you. We get inspired by many different things. Is there any one or two things that you think about and you're just like, I remember just feeling, wow, this was so inspirational for me to have heard or had some connection or experience in anything?
When I my first coaching job, and we talked a little bit before we got on, and I was so bad as a coach, and I didn't know what I was doing, and but very early, I was prepped. I could run a drill. I had my practice plans. I did all this, and within the first year, I dealt with a player whose two best friends committed suicide. I dealt with a player whose ex-boyfriend was stalking her, and we had to involve not just local and state, but federal law enforcement. And then I had a player that got pregnant and spent a good period of time trying to self-abort. And I all of a sudden realized that, hey, this is not about volleyball or passing and figuring out ways to be efficient on siding out of rotation one. It is helping people through life. And the most inspirational, impactful moment that I had as a coach was when I was at Moorhead, and one of our players, her mother was battling cancer. And her freshman year, after her first match, is when she first learned that her mom had and contracted cancer. She had this battle during her time. And in her senior year, it had become terminal, and it was accelerating pretty bad. And we actually moved up her senior day to try to get her mother to be there. And the night before her senior day, her mother passed. And
dear.
I remember going through that with her. And even as I talk about it now, the emotion is very, very raw still. I remember going through that with her, and she wanted to play, and she had the most amazing match you could ask of an athlete. I mean, and I remember after the match was done, we both embraced in the middle of the court, and we broke down. I broke down. And what she did and the lessons that she taught me at a time that I thought I was teaching her things was life-changing in all honesty. And so it's those types of things that make this profession important and valuable, and not just for the people that we have the opportunity to lead and guide, but for ourselves and identifying the lessons that are available to us.
Yeah. Life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life. Thanks for sharing that. Very powerful. And we do not want to forget about that role of leadership on our coaches. You know, the Hall of Fame group was announced, and one of those individuals that's on there, and congrats to all of them, but Barry Goldberg was on there. And I had the conversation with Rick Dunitz, who's our executive director here at the Side Out Foundation, before we came on today. And I said, I remember joining the Side Out Foundation board with Barry. So we were both in the area, and the two of us kind of being there and trying to be helpful in whatever way that we could, because this was a foundation that was looking at, we want to use our sport and connect them to what we're trying to do here in terms of research and different things. And I saw his name there, and it just brought up those memories of how important you are in many different things as a volleyball coach, and you get many different avenues to sort of fall into. And for the foundation, the part that's so special for me is the fact that we are completely supported, like 99.9%, by those volleyball programs out there that decide they want to do something with us. And I'm so happy for Barry that he's getting that award. He has done so many things for the sport of volleyball, especially in this area as well. So I know I'm sorry to those that I'm not mentioning, because you are fantastic and fun. I think Joe Segula was in there.
Yes.
Also another one of my favorite guys.
Yes.
But would you mention just a little bit of your Hall of Famers? I don't want to leave anybody out.
No,
I'm sorry.
And the other two are Kathy Gregory and McCutcheon.
Yes.
It is an all-star class. And, Barry is a very special person. Anybody that had the opportunity to cross paths with him, whether it was for extended periods of time or limited. I got an opportunity. I always knew Barry because of all of his successes at American and doing all of those things. And I had the opportunity to get to know him a little bit better when I hired his son, Jared, on staff. It was his first full-time coaching job at Morehead State with me. And so just being around Barry and Bonnie. And so I had the pleasure to call Bonnie to let her know that Barry was being inducted, and just that whole family. And Bonnie being, as with any coach, there's another person that allows them to be successful in that support. And Bonnie's had as much impact on the sport of volleyball in that community and in that area. So I look forward to celebrating with her in Louisville. And the other thing that's kind of neat about that for her and their family is that Jared was named NAIA Men's Coach of the Year.
Oh, you're kidding.
So he'll be getting awarded at the same banquet that Coach of the Year that his father will be entered into the AVCA Hall of Fame. So really cool, neat things.
Things come in alignment here. Wow, that's amazing. Your time here with Congress, you and Karch came out. What was that all about? Like, what were you guys able to take in, and what were you trying to gain there, having that opportunity?
Unless you're living under a rock, there's a lot of changes happening in the collegiate landscape. There are a lot of lawsuits and rules and things like that. And we're to a point where Congress needs to help, and they need to try to help in three ways. One, which is defining employment status for athletes, because if student athletes are considered employees, it really changes everything at all levels. And so making sure that there's a definition there, some rules on NIL, and making sure that there's a broad landscape there. And then the third thing that's really important for Congress to act on is making sure there's some sort of protections from all the constant legal suits. Because as you make a change, then people who didn't have the advantages of that change can sue. And so there needs to be some protections there. But what Karch and I were doing was meeting with members of Congress to say, we've got to be careful of the unintended consequences of the vulnerability to broad-based sponsorship of sports. And that as athletics directors and institutions are trying to make a decision, how do we exist in this new landscape? One of the options that cannot be on the table is, well, we've just got to eliminate other sports. And when we look at sports like men's volleyball, I want to make sure that we're there saying, hey, this is important to the culture of our country. We're very unique in the way that we have this. It is critical to the Olympic pipeline. We're the only country in the world that, taxpayers or the government does not put money into the Olympic movement. And the colleges are the main training grounds. There's not all these training centers all over and for every sport. College is that. And that message and that narrative has to be shared and be aware of as Congress is making some of these decisions if they're going to act. And what we're asking them is make sure that you communicate the critical importance of maintaining that structure that we have in place now and have had for so long.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It was, I was like, oh my God, I got to learn what little bit this is about here. The time we got to spend there. So thank you for being on today. I just truly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. And they'll sign up for the convention and get those tickets so they can make it to the championship. But I really appreciate it, Jaime, for taking this time.
Well, thank you for having me. I truly enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you for listening. Please share your feedback with us at side-out.org.